We're here in Crooked House, a theatre company in Ireland, in Newbridge, and we are about to talk about the idea of theatre as a social activity. I'm Peter Hussey, the artistic director of the company, and with two of our volunteers and colleagues. One of them is Osan and one is Shams. And we set this up as a conversation so that they could ask questions about what they have seen happening in the company over the last couple of years, and also from Shams's point of view, new things, because she's new to our organisation. Osan has been here for 2 years.
Thank you. So my first question will be this: what are the values of the company and how do you use theatre? And also, how is the connection in between the values of the company and the way you use theatre for?
So the values they come from the theatre practice, and they both values and theatre practice inform each other, and they change because the world doesn't stay the same, and we respond to what's happening in young people's lives and in their culture over the years. It's easy enough for me to say that because we've been practicing for 30 years, so we see change, we see things that emerge. Our values now are not what they were 30 years ago, so it's important to be flexible and to change. But the one that is most, I suppose, appropriate to this conversation is this value of extrospection. As it's a word that means looking outside yourself. Introspection is looking inside yourself. And what we're noticing these days is that in the Western world, at least, there is quite a strong focus on individualism, which is the individual, that the individual has rights and entitlements and privileges and has more importance, I suppose, in life than the public or the community. Words that have to do with political movements which encourage focus on the public have a bad reputation, like community communism, socialism. This country that we live in here is Ireland, is quite a capitalist country, and it looks a lot to America, to the United States. And often the values that come from the United States are a fear of what it means to be social or socialism. Definitely a fear of communism. But in terms of values, we see, especially after the pandemic and especially after people were isolated in their own worlds, often, we see young people with no great set of skills that can help them be social. And there we look to theatre to try and develop those skills somehow, because there are very few other activities left in this world that we live in Ireland, this individualistic world, which help young people be social. They spend a lot of time at home, in their rooms, online, in individual desks at school. They have a relationship with education which is individual. Their learning is individual. By that I mean that the subject that they follow in school, the way that they study, is individual. They might be in a large group, but it doesn't matter what happens in that large group to other people, as long as you perform well. If you perform well, you'll do well in the exams. If you study well, you'll do well in your exams. The whole group doesn't have to do well in order for you to do well. So the focus is on individuality. And tied into that is the idea of privatism, being private. So at one level, there's this desire for young people to try and figure out how to be social, because we're mammals after all. And at another, society is telling them, be private. Don't reveal information. Don't have people stare at you. Move yourself into a space where you can close curtains and not be seen. That kind of private space. And that's taken as a natural thing, a natural sort of way that people want to be. But it's not. It's not. It's an artificial thing. You know, the natural state of humanity is public, in being social. We keep trying to deny our mammal heritage, that we are mammals, that we're social beings. So young people are very confused. And in theatre, it's a primary art form which is social. It means the place to behold something, theatre, the place to play. Drama is about acting, about doing an action in public, not in private. So these concepts of drama and theatre are about making a space in public where you can be public, where you share ideas in public and have conversations, dialogue.
Yeah. Can I ask something about the values and the constant changes of them? So apparently there are some young people in a group, so we can imagine a group of young people. And do you see the changes of these values or the need of them that are coming from individuals or coming from the group itself, if you like? So do you observe the group and say, okay, this is the need for change? Or do you see the individuals and say that, okay, this is happening now and we need to...
It's kind of like, so it is both, you know, the public and the group is understood by looking at the individual. So for example, our theatre is about looking at political issues, social issues, cultural issues, not necessarily focusing on drama therapeutic or individualistic or psychological issues alone. But we use them in order to understand what's going on politically or socially. So you might make a scene that's set in public on a bus, with where one person takes the other one's seat or something, or uses language that is aggressive to that person, or somehow takes away something from that person. And this becomes a metaphor for the social, or a metaphor for the public, for the political, even though it's an individual story. It's your story with Shams, you know, and we're using that moment to say, well, in this culture that's permitted to happen. Why is that permitted to happen? Or in this culture, this is what we think of women, you know, somewhere in the images, in the products of the culture. So therefore, we're showing how it can be perceived in public. And maybe we talk about your individual story of coming from another country, and being here and receiving different reactions from Irish people, or different, how they look at you differently, and that's individual. But we are talking about the social picture when we talk about that. We used to do a lot of theatre of the oppressed. We still do, but theatre of the oppressed with in this traditional formation with Augusto Boal as a methodology for exploring oppression. Very often in European practice anyway, is about making figurative or metaphorical situations only, not necessarily making psychologically real situations in theatre. And therefore it exists as a kind of symbolic way of looking at a situation, you know, where the whole narrative of the oppression is done in 5 minutes or something, you know. What we have found is that doesn't allow us to see how in everyday daily life oppression actually happens. It removes the idea of repression, which is political. It removes it from daily life. So we don't understand it. So we have started to do ordinary scenes, ordinary activities, things that you find in the social world, and from them say, this is actually a scene of oppression. This is how it happens over 3 years, not just over 1 month or 1 day. So we can only do that by looking at individual stories, your experience, what you experience, your friends, what you saw them doing, what you heard from your colleagues. And we share those stories and make the theatre political with those stories, or social.
I was going to ask a question about the process, actually, but you briefly explained. I was going to ask, what are the objectives to bring the young people to that point where they can express their feelings or the problems that they have and they would like to share or act on?
So the process is very, very important, and we feel that the theatre space that we make, where young people can come together and share their ideas, is not enough for it to be a space where they can just express themselves. That has to be first. Create a space where they express themselves, but it can't just end there. So we're finding activities, exercises, games, which encourage young people to express themselves, to say, this is how I feel right now. I don't understand that, and this is how I feel about it. So part of the expressing of themselves is playing. Try out this, try out that way of moving, try combining this dialogue with that movement, try moving to that music, try having a scene where you're inventing a character, try being very powerful in a scene, try being very weak in a scene. All that is playing. So that's expressing yourself. And out of this huge amount of expressing yourself, young people will begin to get ideas, form opinions, begin to consider reactions and actions that are appropriate to them in their life, begin to consider theories. So therefore they begin to think, oh, well, now I have something to express. I'm beginning to form an opinion about gender. So I have an idea. I'm going to say something about gender. So here is how I'm going to do it. And at that point, which is where we want to bring them to, they begin to have a conversation. So they're going to use theatre to have this conversation with the audience. So they've moved past self-expressing, exploring, feeling around, to actually having something to say and having people to say it to. They're beginning to consider the audience. And you, as a director or as a theatre maker, are helping them shape that conversation. You have the audience in your mind for when they're making their performance. It's not good enough in our theatre just to express yourself and leave it there in front of an audience. It's a bit like inviting people to dinner in your house and giving them crisps or peanuts, or maybe just the starter, and say, that's all I wanted to do. I have this wonderful starter, it's cucumber, and I've mixed it with yogurt, and here, try this. What do you think? Is good? And settle there. It needs more than that. People come into this space expecting more meaningful discussion, expecting something more significant, expecting something that is deeper than just you expressing yourself in your own terms, according to your own terms. So we have to encourage young people to think about what they present in front of an audience as being part of a conversation, that you have to think, how will the audience react to this? Are we shaping it so that we understand our audience and maybe start off with something humorous and funny, get them laughing, bring them slowly along, share some ideas with the audience that teaches them how to read what we're going to present later. If it's magic realistic theatre, which is what we do, magic realism, share some ways of working so that they understand it and they're not alienated and put off and resistant. You really have to have this kind of conversation with your audience. So you're training them and you're leading them, and then you're saying something to them, and then you must give them a chance to feel. If you do all the feeling in the acting and in the performance, all they are left with is a sense of appreciation or admiration. They can say, that was very good, I applauded it, it's a beautiful statue. Or they get bored. What are they doing there? Why do you bring them in to this place? So they can see your wonderful expression, which only has meaning to you, which looks good, but only has meaning to you.
Okay.
Or are you going to have this conversation with the audience? After every show, also we have a post-show discussion, so they can actually ask us questions and they can talk to us and challenge us and say things about the show that they didn't understand, or that they did and they want to share with us.
So I'd like to ask something about the impact as well. So after this process that the young people have as a group or an individual all together, according to your experience so far in this company, what are the impacts as a result of this process on the community or on young people's life, their life, that you observed so far?
The main purpose of being social, in my experience, is to teach people how to be resilient and deal with change. Because if you're social, you're part of a large group, and that large group is always changing. People leave, people come. You find new friends, you lose old friends. Sometimes tragically, sometimes you are the one who leaves, and so on. It's constantly changing. Being social means dealing with different energies every day. So your friends are down, your friends are hyper, your friends are excited, your friends are motivated when you're not. All those energies, you have to understand how to deal with them. Being social also means that you need to know how far you can go with your joking, with your energy, or what you need to put into a group in order to lift it. Or maybe it's too much energy and you need to step back. All these skills are about being social. If you develop those skills and you function well within a group, then you're able to deal with change. Really, you're able to deal with things changing. And we live in a cosmos, not just a world. Nothing is the same, stays the same in the cosmos. Nothing, ever. It looks like it, but it doesn't. In your world, in your life, everything is changing. And the more, unfortunately, our young people stay on their own and become individuals, close themselves off, the more they cannot handle change. And there are often tragic results with that. They get anxious. They are unable to communicate. They haven't practiced hearing what other people say that disagree with them. They don't understand difference, or different people, or people who have different opinions to theirs. They're not able to have open conversations without shutting them down. They're not able to function in a social community. So the impact of doing theatre like this is very much about training young people how to develop those skills of conversation and existing in a wide group of people whose opinions are different to theirs, whose ideas, genders, cultures are different to theirs, and that they're able to have conversations and move on. And when things change, they're able to go with the flow. They understand fundamentally that if you have problems like depression or low self-esteem or social anxiety, that they're not things that everybody else has to cross over in order to have a relationship with you. They're things that very often you're putting in your own way, that block you from being engaged with people. It's not to say you should get rid of them. Of course you can't get rid of depression, but you carry it with you. You don't put it in front of you. Understand?
Yeah.
The difference. You carry it with you into the group and you say, I'm nervous. Or it's a space where I can say, I'm not feeling this today. I can't contribute this. I need this or that. You acknowledge it and carry it with you, and you still do the thing. Instead of, I can't come near this place today. I'm closing myself away. I'm going into my bedroom. That's not the best recourse.
Peter, what's the theatre for you?
What's theatre for me? And in Crooked House, I suppose. First of all, the architecture of the theatre is designed to encourage us to be social. It's different to the architecture of film, and it's different to the architecture of other things like music listening or whatever. Theatre is based on this social sphere, this idea of being social, and for me, it's a very specific thing. It's a very specific art form. Not all performance is theatre, obviously, but there's a lot of performance that claims to be theatre, which isn't. It's in fact maybe a lecture or it's circus on stage, or it's some form of dance, or it's performance art. They all have their roles. They all have their significant contribution to culture, but they're not drama or theatre necessarily. They're not. And so that means that theatre and drama is very specific for us. It's something that needs to be in conversation with the audience and teaching other people to be social. And we tend to forget the important distinction of what theatre is. Young people tend to, unless they've studied it. And it is about that deep conversation, a meaningful conversation with the audience. It's not about doing tricks that can be admired or expressing emotion that can be appreciated. It is more than that. It's a conversation. And that conversation is aimed ultimately at helping both audience and performers be more social, to behave in a group better. And that group is called society, I suppose. So, it's definitely moving in that direction. Whether it's about appreciating and understanding the great beauty of an artistic form, or the collective endeavour of a group to keep someone like Macbeth out of power, or what it's like to have a very strong religious belief that almost takes you over. All of those are ways that society explores. I'm talking about Hamlet and Macbeth in those, that society explores itself in order to move, to grow, and to become more social, not more isolationist, not more individualistic, and not more private, to become more social. So our theatre is about helping people move past those into setting up their own independence of thought and action that helps them develop resilience, deal with change, and become at a fundamental level more human.